Hi, and thank you for watching my submission to the University of Oregon's 2025 Undergraduate Research Symposium. My name is Miriel. I'm a recent landscape architecture graduate, Bachelor of Landscape Architecture. This is my project that I did as a SURF fellowship last year in the summer of 2024, and it's called Mapping Amazon Creek, an Urban Understory Plant Survey. So Amazon Creek is a tributary of the Long Tom River, which in turn is part of the Willamette River watershed, and that spans the Willamette Valley and includes Oregon's three most populous cities, Portland, Salem, and of course Eugene. Amazon Creek originates in Eugene's South Hills and flows through the city before entering the preserved wetlands to the northwest of town, where it there splits in two. It becomes a diversion channel that goes to Fern Ridge Reservoir, which is a flood control and water retention project that includes a wildlife area home to over 250 species of birds, and the lower Amazon, which flows through approximately 13 miles of farmland until meeting the Long Tom just west of Junction City, and it there becomes part of the drinking water for the city of Monroe. The urban stretch of Amazon Creek through Eugene creates a corridor through the center of town, linking the South Hills and Far West by way of downtown. Approximately 40 square miles of Eugene's stormwater is drained through Amazon Creek, so that is most of our stormwater as a city. The creek runs through urban areas and more naturalized areas and can look very different depending on where it's at in its journey. So sometimes it widens, sometimes it narrows, and each segment really has its own personality. So, as I said before, last summer I was fortunate enough to receive an undergraduate research grant to conduct this survey along the entire urban creek. Over the course of that summer, I walked just under 10 miles of creek in my hip waders from the headwaters in South Eugene to Royal Avenue near the city limits in Far West. I mapped species makeup and concentration of shrubs and forbs, with the exception of grasses, which dominate throughout and were just beyond my capacity. There's too much of them. They really just need their own survey. I don't have a background in botany, but for this survey I used my plant identification knowledge from my classes in the landscape architecture department, in addition to the plant identification apps iNaturalist and PlantNet, and I took great care to keep my IDs as accurate as I could manage. So here's just a really broad look at my results. I collected 1,585 unique data points, each with several features attached to them. So that was geolocation, a photo for each point, the genus and species, the common name, native status, prevalence, location in relation to the creek, the general vegetative density of the surrounding area, and whether the creek segment was channelized in concrete. And this was for each instance of species that I encountered. Here you can see each point differentiated by whether it was a native species or an exotic or invasive species. And you can see kind of some interesting differences in sort of the segment and where is a more invasive area and where has kind of a healthier, more native system. And we'll get into that a little bit more later on, getting into the segments more. There were 18 points that I left with unknown native status. I just wasn't able to figure out if it was a native species or not, so I didn't want to pretend. And then willows were something that I categorized by themselves, partially because there were just so many of them. These are planted commonly by the city of Eugene, and so we can generally assume that they are probably mostly native, but I classified them separately just because I didn't have the capacity to confirm for each occurrence that I found. This is a look at the top 7 most frequently occurring exotic or invasive species. These are all invasive in the state of Oregon. And the winner by far is Himalayan blackberry, Rubus armeniacus, which is really no surprise to me. You can pretty much find this stuff everywhere, and this goes just along the whole creek. It's really everywhere. You can't really find an area that doesn't have any of it, although it's more dominant in some areas. After that, we had climbing nightshade, then common teasel, creeping buttercup, morning glory, ragwort, and poison hemlock. These are the top 7 most frequently occurring native species that I recorded. The winner is red osier dogwood, Cornus sericea, with 71 points. And this one had a really nicely distributed presence throughout the creek. You can see it is in most areas, not quite all. After the dogwood was snowberry, which is more towards the headwaters, but there's some in downtown, a tiny bit in West Eugene as well. And then common cow parsnip, which also had a very nicely distributed region. And then I lumped together all of the native roses. So I just really, for simplicity's sake, and because they can get kind of difficult to tell apart, I could tell that, they were native, so I just lumped them together in a category. After the roses, there's Rose spirea or Douglas spirea with 40 points. Then horsetail, which was more towards the headwaters. And then soft brush or Juncus effusus, and that was much more in the West Eugene area. This is a look broken down into 7 segments based on site conditions like residential neighborhoods versus commercial or industrial, or urban versus parkland, and human presence. Also, some areas of the creek have a higher presence from people camping or sheltering there, specifically West Eugene. Generally speaking, the creek becomes more disturbed the farther it goes from the headwaters, so South Eugene has the most pristine systems, and then you see more disturbance from people and animals as you go. And this is reflected in the proportion of native species versus exotic or invasive. South Eugene has the highest native presence, and it starts to kind of lean towards more exotics as you continue north and west. In far west, though, it is mostly parkland, and there's been a lot of recent planting work done by the city, so you can see the natives start to come back a bit there at the end. You might be wondering about this hole, though, in the center here and this area where it kind of thins out. So as for the area that just has no points whatsoever, this was actually an active construction zone while I was surveying, so I just was not able to get in there at all. And that was because the city was actively dechannelizing this segment. Been a project that was in the works for a long time, and they finally were able to begin construction last summer. And there's some more recent photos you can see on the left-hand side here. And that is an ongoing project. I believe they're going back in this summer to add some more stuff, do some more planting, I believe. And I think maybe tear out some more concrete. So that's very exciting. And why that's exciting is this other area that's right next to the bald spot where it just kind of thins out a bit. This is the segment that I was able to survey that is channelized in concrete. So the Army Corps of Engineers channelized Amazon Creek in the 50s here in Eugene, and it's been kind of slowly working its way back from that since then. But this area is still exactly as it was built then. It's still just raw concrete, and there's really just not much medium or space for plants to grow here, so there was just not many plants for me to survey, as you can see in these photos. One of the features that I recorded with each point is whether it was in an area that was channelized or not, channelized in concrete. So that gives me this really handy, clear little map of areas that are channelized on the top in blue versus the overall vegetative density, which pretty much was high everywhere except for this little area where it was mostly quite low. And that's really pretty unusual for the creek, even in areas that didn't have a very healthy seeming system. There was still a lot of vegetation, even if it was just blackberry, and that is still providing habitat. So this is really a kind of a big step down to just have no vegetation at all. Here's a closer up look at, you can just see the difference in the actual points that I was collecting, and how most of them are exotic or invasive as well. And this is compared to just a typical segment of a soil and rock bank section of the creek. This section of the creek downtown that's still channelized in concrete was actually the focus of my terminal landscape architecture studio this year. So I was looking at ways that we can introduce some more vegetation, some more habitat, without being able to widen, because there are often homes and buildings built kind of right up to the edge of that channel. So I was able to use my data from this survey in that project and take the plants that I was seeing in other areas of the creek and that we therefore know can exist in this riparian system if given the chance and if, given actual soil. And so I could take some of those species and apply them to the area that I was designing. So that was a really cool thing that I was able to do. And we're nearing the end here, but before I go, I want to quickly share some photos that I took while I was out there. This wasn't explicitly a photography project, but once I was out there just spending every day being in the creek, seeing it from a new perspective, I ended up taking a million photos, and I just want to share some of them. Firstly, I think anyone who lives in Eugene knows that Amazon Creek is full of trash, and that's absolutely true, and I can attest to that. But there was just some of the trash was really interesting, and it was kind of a fun scavenger hunt to be walking through, seeing all of these items, some of them that I really just wouldn't expect to be out there, and some of them kind of arranged in ways that seemed very purposeful. I'm like, who is out here doing this? And then also, of course, the wildlife presence out there. I saw a million birds, which are hard to get photos of, good photos. But here's just some tracks. I believe these are raccoon tracks, and then some bird tracks as well, and a salamander that I saw near the headwaters. And then one of the most exciting things that happened out there was whenever I would find evidence of beavers. I never saw a beaver, but I saw some dams and some logs that had been chewed through. So that's really cool because beavers can't really be in Amazon Creek, but it's cool that they want to be. And then finally, there were some interesting human social messages that I saw, whether that was just kind of a self-expression, sort of a typical graffiti or street art, or often actually very specifically addressed messages left for someone else. Like this was their way of communicating to that person, which I found really quite charming, just as kind of a corridor that we're using, not just wildlife, but that people are using this path along the creek to talk to each other and keep in touch, even if it's sometimes for, petty or unhappy reasons. But I found that quite charming when I was out there. And that's all I've got. So I'd like to say thank you again to the Center for Undergraduate Research and Engagement, and thank you to you for watching this video.